What would you do if the person you've loved for 40 years suddenly looked at you like a complete stranger? Today, I'm going to share with you the most beautiful love story I've ever heard. It's about Margaret and Robert, a couple who discovered that true love really can conquer anything. Even when the mind forgets, the heart remembers. Stay with me, because this story will change how you. But before we begin, if you enjoy stories that touch the soul, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Margaret Thompson was 60 years old when her world turned upside down. Picture this, a woman who had been married to her high school sweetheart Robert for 42 years, who knew every line on his face, every joke he'd tell, every habit that made him, him. They lived in a charming house in Portland, Oregon, with a garden that Margaret tended every morning. She was a retired librarian, the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday and made cookies for the neighborhood kids. Robert was a retired mechanic who still fixed neighbors' cars in his spare time, just because he loved helping people. Their love story was the kind you see in movies. High school sweethearts who never looked at anyone else. They'd been through everything together, raising 3 beautiful children, losing parents, financial struggles, health scares. They were that couple everyone looked at and said, "I want what they have." But on a Tuesday morning in March, everything changed. Margaret woke up, looked at Robert making coffee in their kitchen of 20 years, and asked him the question that would break his heart, "Excuse me, sir." Now, folks, let me tell you something about memory loss that many people don't understand. It doesn't happen like in the movies, where you just forget everything at once. It's cruel and gradual, and it picks and chooses what it takes from you. The doctors explained that Margaret had early-onset dementia, a condition that affects about 200,000 Americans under 65. But here's what made Margaret's case so heartbreaking: she had lost almost all memory of her adult life, but could remember her childhood with perfect clarity. She remembered her parents, her siblings, her teenage friends, but the man who had been by her side for 4 decades? He was a complete stranger. The house they'd built together? Foreign. Her children? She kept asking where her parents were, why these strange adults kept calling her mom. Robert later told me, and this still gives me chills, that the hardest part wasn't that she didn't recognize him. It was that she was afraid of him. This woman who had shared his bed, his dreams, his entire adult life, was now looking at him with fear in her eyes. Can you imagine? Your life partner, your best friend, your everything, and they see you as a threat. The first few weeks were devastating. Robert tried everything. He showed her photo albums, played their wedding video, brought out love letters they'd written to each other during his deployment in Vietnam. Nothing worked. Music becomes more melancholic. Margaret's condition meant she needed 24-hour care, but Robert refused to put her in a facility. "She's still my wife," he told their children. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. Those weren't just words to me. But friends, let me tell you what for better or worse really looks like. It looks like a 62-year-old man learning to be a caregiver overnight. It looks like being patient when the woman you love screams at you to get out of her house. It looks like introducing yourself to your own wife every single morning. Pause. Robert's daily routine became a heartbreaking ritual. Every morning, he'd knock on what used to be their bedroom door. He'd move to the couch to make her feel safer. He'd say, "Good morning, Margaret. My name is Robert. I'm here to take care of you. You're safe." And every morning, she'd ask him where her parents were. Every morning, he'd gently explain that they had passed away years ago. Every morning, she'd grieve them as if hearing the news for the first time. Their children begged him to get help, to put her somewhere with professional care. But Robert had a plan. He said something that still gives me goosebumps. She fell in love with me once. Maybe she can fall in love with me again. Now, this is where the story gets truly remarkable. About 2 months after Margaret's diagnosis, Robert was in the garden, the same garden Margaret used to tend every morning. He was trying to keep up with her roses, but honestly, he didn't have her green thumb. Margaret was watching him from the kitchen window, and something about the scene struck her. She came outside, which was unusual because she rarely left the house, and stood next to him. "You're doing that wrong," she said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken to him without fear or confusion in her voice. "The roses need to be pruned." And then, friends, something beautiful happened. Margaret knelt down next to Robert and began working on the roses. For 20 minutes, they worked side by side in complete, comfortable silence. When Robert glanced at her, he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen in months: peace. That evening, when Robert knocked on the bedroom door to check on her, Margaret didn't ask who he was. Instead, she said, "Robert? The nice man who helps with the garden?" It wasn't much, but it was everything. From that day forward, Robert made the garden their meeting place. Every morning, instead of knocking on her door, he'd go outside and start working. And every morning, Margaret would eventually join him. What happened next was like watching someone fall in love for the second time. Because in many ways, that's exactly what was happening. Margaret began to remember small things, not memories, but feelings. She remembered that she felt safe with Robert. She remembered that his hands were gentle. She remembered that he made her laugh. Robert, meanwhile, discovered something beautiful. He was getting to know his wife all over again. Without the weight of 4 decades of shared experiences, he saw Margaret with fresh eyes. Her curiosity about everything, the way she'd ask questions like she was discovering the world for the first time. They'd sit in the garden for hours, and Robert would tell her stories about their life together, not trying to make her remember, but sharing them like fairy tales. Once upon a time, he'd say, there was a beautiful librarian who fell in love with a mechanic. And slowly, Margaret began to fall in love with these stories. Even if she couldn't remember living them, she loved hearing about this couple who sounded so happy together. The turning point came 6 months after her diagnosis. Margaret was having what her doctors called a lucid moment, a brief time when the fog lifted. She looked at Robert, really looked at him, and said, "I know I'm supposed to know you. And I'm sorry that I don't. But I want you to know that even though I can't remember loving you, I'm falling in love with you right now." Robert told me he cried for an hour after she said that. But they weren't tears of sadness anymore, they were tears of gratitude. Margaret's condition didn't improve medically speaking, she still has dementia. But what happened in their relationship was nothing short of miraculous. They created a new kind of love, one that didn't depend on memory. Robert learned to live in the present moment with Margaret. Instead of mourning the woman she used to be, he celebrated the woman she was becoming. Margaret, free from the expectations of remembering, allowed herself to feel what was happening in her heart right now. Today, 3 years later, they still start every morning in the garden. Margaret still doesn't remember their 42 years together, but she knows deep in her soul that Robert is her person. When people ask her who he is, she says, "He's the man I'm in love with." And isn't that the most beautiful definition of true love? Not just someone you've loved for years, but someone you choose to love again every single day. Friends, Margaret and Robert's story teaches us something profound about the nature of love. We often think love is about shared memories, about history, about all the things you've been through together. But their story shows us that love is actually about choice, the choice to care for someone, to be patient with them, to see them with kind eyes, every single day. Robert could have given up. He could have seen Margaret's condition as the end of their love story. Instead, he saw it as the beginning of a new chapter. He chose to believe that love is stronger than memory, that the heart knows things the mind has forgotten. And Margaret? She taught us that it's never too late to fall in love, even if it's with the same person all over again. So I want to ask you, what would you do? Could you love someone who didn't remember loving you back? Could you be patient enough to let them discover you? If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to remember that love really can conquer all. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate the incredible resilience of the human heart. Until next time, remember, true love isn't about perfect memory, it's about